The worst things cave explorers did to stay alive. Let's see what's in the video.
Mexican Fissure Cave, Wedged
Okay.
Caver Rescue. On a warm morning in 1991, a young caver named Leonardo Perez set out to explore an unmapped cave in the mountains of Mexico. His friends called him Leo.
जो केव अनमैप्ड है उसमें जाना क्यों? ये मरेगा. Let's see. I don't know. नहीं, ये तो सर्वाइवल वाली है ना. Let's see. What he did to stay alive.
And he was known for pushing into tight spaces that most people would never
That
dare
is anti-gravity. अगर वो उस तरह से नीचे जा रहा है.
to enter.
Anti-gravity.
On this day, he went alone, a decision that would nearly cost him his life. The cave was not a wide-open cavern, but a narrow fissure, a long crack in the mountain rock. Leo squeezed deeper and deeper into the fissure, moving downward through passages that kept getting tighter. Then, without warning, his body slipped into a V-shaped crevice and he dropped straight down.
तो ये ऐसे ही नीचे जाएगा, right? ये ऐसे ही नीचे जाएगा और ऊपर आएगा. Okay.
The walls of the crevice pinched together at the bottom like a giant stone jaw. Leo's body became wedged so tightly between the rock walls that he could barely breathe. He could not move his legs at all, and only his arms had a tiny bit of freedom. He was stuck in a near vertical position with his head slightly above his feet. There was no light, no sound, and no one knew where he was. Leo tried to push himself upward, but the rock held him like a vice. Every time he
But उसके पास एक चीज थी. उसको खुजली थी. तो अब ये फंसा.
exhaled, his chest got slightly smaller and the walls seemed to press in even tighter. He quickly realized that struggling would only waste his energy and make things worse. So he forced himself to stay calm and think clearly about how to survive. The section of cave where he was
उसने ये क्यों नहीं सोचा कि अंदर ना जाओ. ये सोचा कि let's
trapped was completely dry.
Okay.
There was no dripping water anywhere. Without water, Leo knew he would be dead within a few days.
Yes.
Then he
ये
remembered
ऐसे ही फंसा था, right? नीचे कुछ नहीं है.
something in his pocket. A small plastic specimen container he had brought for collecting samples. He made a desperate decision and urinated into the tiny container. Then he raised it to his lips and drank it. It was the only source of fluid he had.
Let me ask you. अगर आप फंसे हो ऐसी सिचुएशन में, okay, what would you do? देखो अगर मैं फंसा हूं और मुझे अपना सुसु पीना पड़े. I mean anything for survival, okay? Anything.
And he used it again and again over the following days. One day passed, then two.
Just imagine कि ये it's a pineapple juice or something, okay? And pizza. Color तो same ही है. Right.
Two, then three, and still no one came. Leo drifted in and out of sleep, his body growing weaker with every passing hour. His muscles began to cramp painfully from being locked in the same position for so long. But he refused to give up. He kept his mind focused on staying alive.
Yes, you can
On
do
the
it.
fourth day, Leo gathered every bit of strength he had left and began to whistle. He whistled over and over, hoping the sound might travel up through the cracks in the rock. By an incredible stroke of luck, a group of local villagers walking nearby heard faint whistling coming from the ground. They followed the sound and realized someone was trapped deep inside the fissure. The villagers called for help, and a rescue team arrived as fast as they could. But pulling Leo out was not going to be easy. The rock held him like a trap. Rescuers spent the next 15 hours carefully chipping away at the stone around his body.
Okay, so इस सिचुएशन में उसने अपनी लाइफ तो खतरे में डाली, लेकिन रेस्क्यूअर्स की भी, जो आराम से बैठे थे, राइट? आराम से बैठे थे कि फ्री के पैसे मिल रहे, लेकिन नहीं, कॉल आया कि एक बंदा फंसा है, आओ चलो निकालो. कम ऑन. उसको बचाने के चक्कर में अगर रेस्क्यूअर्स को भी कुछ हुआ, then what? Then what? Let's continue.
One wrong move could have caused a collapse or crushed him even further. Finally, after 115 hours trapped in total darkness, Leonardo Perez was pulled free from the mountain. He was rushed to the nearest hospital, severely dehydrated and barely conscious, but alive. Nullarbor
अभी मैंने कमेंट सेक्शन में पढ़ा था कि अगर अपना खुद का सुसु या यूरिन को पियो तो फिर डिहाइड्रेशन होगा. इट्स सेम एज सी वाटर. अगर समुद्र का पानी पियो तो ज्यादा पानी पीने की इच्छा होगी, राइट? तो इट्स समथिंग लाइक दैट. आई डोंट नो, बायोलॉजी में नहीं जाऊंगा, आई डोंट नो क्या चीज है उसमें, But
In
continue.
cave, dry survival. On a scorching afternoon in 1953, an amateur caver set out to explore an unmarked cave on the Nullarbor.
दोबारा unmarked. If you are going केव में जा रहे हो जो अनमार्क्ड है कि पता ही नहीं तुम किस डायरेक्शन में कहाँ पे फंसोगे, तुम्हें पता ही नहीं है, राइट? उसका मैप ही नहीं, अनमैप्ड है, क्यों जाना वहां पे?
Plain in southern Australia. The Nullarbor was one of the driest and most unforgiving landscapes on Earth,
ओके,
stretching hundreds
गर्मी
of
भी
miles
होगी,
with almost no water.
नो वाटर, सी देयर इज नो वाटर, ना ही अनमैप्ड है ऊपर से केव, पानी की भी कमी है और ऊपर से गर्मी भी होगी बिकॉज इट्स इन अ सॉर्ट ऑफ डेजर्ट और समथिंग, राइट? मजा आएगा, इसको देखने में मजा आएगा, चलो
The
फर्स्ट
caves hidden beneath the plain were known for their extreme heat, bone-dry
एक्सट्रीम
air,
हीट,
and thick layers of choking dust. The man had only basic supplies like a flashlight, a small canteen of water, and a specimen bag slung over his shoulder. He lowered himself through a narrow entrance hole
जाओ जाओ मजा आएगा,
and
अंदर जाओ
began
आराम
walking
से।
into the darkness below.
लुक, अगर ऐसे चल सकते हो किसी भी केव में तो जाओ, लेकिन अगर तुम ऐसे रेंगते हुए जा रहे हो, यू नो, जहाँ पे हार्डली तुम खड़े हो पा रहे हो, उस जगह पे क्यों जाना? वाई? ऐसी मौत क्यों मरनी यार तुम्हें एकदम, चलो।
The temperature inside the cave entrance was over 100 degrees, and the air was so dry it cracked his
ओनली
lips
ओनली 100 डिग्रीज, राइट?
within minutes. He moved deeper, hoping to find cooler passages further
अभी
underground.
छोटी होती जाएगी,
But
राइट? छोटी होगी, फिर ये सांप बनेगा, फिर ये सांप की तरह रेंगते हुए अंदर जाएगा, फिर भी जगह नहीं होगी, फिर भी जाएगा, और हम देखेंगे, चलो हम मजे लेंगे, ठीक है,
as he
कंटिन्यू,
squeezed through a tight crawlway, the
जाओ
loose rock beneath him shifted and collapsed.
गिरो,
The passage
परफेक्ट,
behind him was now blocked with rubble, and he could not climb back the way he came.
ऑब्वियसली।
He was alone, with no one expecting him back for several days. He tried to clear the rocks, but every attempt brought more dust and debris crashing down. After hours of digging, he realized
आई होप अगर उसके पास मोबाइल डिवाइस है तो भी फिर भी वो कम्युनिकेट नहीं कर सकता, राइट? बिकॉज उतने अंदर नेटवर्क नहीं आने वाला, डीप लेयर, कंटिन्यू।
he was completely trapped. His flashlight was already growing dim, and the heat was draining the water from his body at a terrifying rate. He rationed his small canteen carefully, but in the extreme heat, it was empty by the end of the first day. Without water in this kind of heat, he knew he had less than 48 hours before his organs would shut down. The dust in the air was so thick that every breath felt like swallowing sand. By the second day, his mouth was completely dry and his muscles had started to cramp violently.
ओके,
Desperate to survive,
दैट्स
he
दैट
did
टू
what
सर्वाइव।
many trapped cavers
संदीप महेश्वरी देख के आया था,
before him had been
Let's-
forced to do. He urinated into his empty canteen and forced himself to drink it. The taste was foul, but it put enough fluid back into his body to keep him from passing out. He repeated this cycle over the next 2 days, each time the
देखो अगर यूरिन पी के जिंदा रहना पड़े, आई थिंक इट्स नॉट बैड, ओके, बिकॉज हाँ थोड़ा सा डिहाइड्रेशन होगा बट थोड़ा सा तो कुछ तो जाएगा बॉडी में, राइट?
liquid becoming darker and harder to swallow.
अल्टीमेटली इट्स अ पाइनएप्पल जूस, आई मीन दिखने में, ठीक है, एंजॉय।
His body temperature was dangerously high, and heat stroke was closing
बाय द वे आई नो समवन जिसने पिया है रियल लाइफ में, ओके, आई डोंट नो आपके भी कोई होगा, एज अ मेडिकेशन वो यूज करते हैं, आई डोंट नो है उनकी कुछ,
in on him like a slow-moving killer. He lay flat on the cave floor,
ओके,
pressing his skin against the rock to absorb whatever coolness it had.
सो गया
By
तो
the
खेल
third
खत्म,
day, his flashlight was dead,
दैट,
and he was left in total darkness with only the sound of his own breathing. He began tapping on the cave walls with a rock, hoping someone above might hear the sound.
नो वे,
On the surface,
आपको लगता है कि आवाज जाएगी?
a local
Let's
farming
see.
family had noticed a vehicle parked near the cave entrance for days with no sign of its owner. They contacted authorities, and a small search party was sent to investigate. The searchers found the collapsed crawlway and began carefully removing the rubble by hand. After several exhausting hours of digging, they broke through to the other side. They found the
Lucky.
caver lying flat on the ground,
He is lucky.
barely conscious, covered in dust, and clutching his empty canteen. He had been trapped for just over 72 hours in one of the hottest caves on the continent. Doctors who treated him said he was on the very edge
रेस्क्यूअर्स को के अगर सोचो कि रेस्क्यूअर्स को बोले कि पियोगे पाइनएप्पल पाइनएप्पल वाटर,
of fatal heat stroke and kidney failure.
Okay.
They said his decision to stay hydrated by any means necessary was the only thing that kept him alive. Sterkfontein Caves, 21-day survival tragedy. On a day in 1984, an experienced caver
ओके, तो जो पहला बंदा था ही वॉज लकी, दूसरा भी लकी था बिकॉज दूसरे लोगों ने उसे नोटिस किया कि देयर इज समवन इनसाइड, राइट? अगर कोई नोटिस ना करता देन दोनों मर चुके होते, राइट? मोरल ऑफ द स्टोरी, मत जाओ अंदर। ओके।
named Peter Verholzel entered the Sterkfontein Caves in South Africa.
ओह दैट्स
The Sterkfontein cave system was famous for its ancient fossils, but it
ओह
was also one of the most
फॉर व्हाट? लोग गए और मर गए, और ओके।
dangerous caves in the country. Large sections of the cave were completely flooded with dark, silty water that could blind a diver in seconds.
लेकिन नहीं, ये जाएगा और फंसेगा, ये हमें पता है, ये हमें पता है कि ये जाएगा, ठीक है, बंदा, और फंसेगा, लेकिन इसको ये पता नहीं चला। चलो, हम इसको देखेंगे फंसते हुए। चलो,
Peter made his way deep into the system, navigating through narrow tunnels and flooded
कीप गोइंग।
passages. At some point during his exploration, he became completely lost.
हाँ हाँ।
The cave was a maze of underwater channels that all looked the same, and Peter
अच्छा,
could not find his way back. He swam through passage after passage, but every turn led to more dark, murky water. His air supply was running low and panic was starting to set in. Then, by pure
ओके, तो पहले तो जो पहला बंदा था, लोगों ने नोटिस किया था, दूसरे को भी नोटिस किया था बिकॉज उसकी कार बाहर थी। इसको लोग कैसे बचाएंगे? लेट्स सी, आई डोंट नो।
chance, his head
अगर फैमिली मेंबर या फ्रेंड ट्राई टू कांटेक्ट हिम, अगर कांटेक्ट ना हो पाया या किसी को बताओ कि मैं यहाँ पे जाने वाला हूँ, तो फिर हो सकता है, बाकी आई डोंट थिंक
broke
सो।
the surface of the water
बचा तो है।
inside a small air pocket. It was a tiny dry ledge, like a small island, surrounded by the flooded cave system on every side.
ओके।
Peter pulled himself onto the ledge and lay there in complete darkness, gasping for breath. He was alive, but he was trapped in one of the worst places imaginable. There was no way to call for help, and no one could hear him this deep underground. He knew that swimming back into the flooded maze would almost certainly mean drowning in the silt-filled water. So he made the only choice he could. He stayed on the ledge and waited for rescue. The first few days were the hardest, as hunger and thirst began to tear at his body. There was no food on the ledge, and the floodwater around him was filled with dangerous silt and bacteria.
ओके।
When his thirst became unbearable, Peter turned to the only source of fluid available to him. He began drinking his
सबको पाइनएप्पल जूस पीना है। ये आई गेस ये तीसरा है ना?
own urine to keep his body hydrated enough to
Pineapple.
survive. It was a desperate act, but it kept him alive day after day in the endless darkness.
आई हैव अ क्वेश्चन। ये जहाँ पे जो भी एयर पॉकेट या जो इससे मिली, जहाँ पे ये सांस ले सकता था, वहाँ पे ऑक्सीजन लिमिटेड होगा ना? आई मीन ज्यादा देर तक नहीं रह सकता बिकॉज लिमिटेड ऑक्सीजन। कार्बन डाइऑक्साइड वहाँ पे इंक्रीज होगा, देन कार्बन डाइऑक्साइड, यू नो समथिंग रॉन्ग, राइट?
1 week passed, then 2 weeks, and still no rescue came.
हाँ।
Peter's body was breaking down. His muscles wasted away and his organs began to fail. He lost more than 40 pounds as his body consumed itself to stay alive. But somehow, his heart kept beating and his lungs kept breathing. Above ground, search teams had been looking for Peter since the day he went missing. Divers entered the flooded cave system again and again, but
Okay.
the silty water made visibility almost zero.
Zero.
It took rescuers 21 agonizing days to finally locate the small air pocket
21 days. Okay.
where Peter had been surviving. When they reached him, they were shocked that he was still showing signs of recent life. But tragically, Peter Verholzel did not survive.
21 दिन तक उसने खाया क्या? पीने के लिए तो उसके पास था पाइनएप्पल जूस, बट खाया क्या? डोंट टेल मी उसने वही खाया जो मैं सोच रहा हूँ, बट
Survive long enough to be saved. His body had endured 3 full weeks of starvation, darkness,
Okay.
and isolation before finally giving out. Medical examiners who studied his body called his survival a biological miracle.
या
They said his desperate choice to stay hydrated was the only reason he lasted as long as he did. Reasending Cave Rockfall Rescue. On June 8, 2014, a cave researcher named Johann Westhauser entered one of the most dangerous caves in Germany. The cave was called Riesending, and it was the deepest cave in all of Germany.
इट्स अ बिग केव बाय द वे, बट होगी ऑब्वियसली आगे जाके नैरो होगी और ये फंसेगा। आई मीन नॉट फंसेगा, रॉक फॉल में, ठीक है।
Johann was not a beginner. He had explored this cave many times before. He was part of the team that originally discovered and mapped the cave system. On this
गुड।
trip, he went deep underground with two other experienced cavers.
ओके।
They climbed down narrow passages and squeezed through tight tunnels for hours. When the team reached a depth of 1,000 meters below the surface, something terrible happened. Without warning, a large rock broke loose from the cave wall and struck Johann directly on the head. The impact gave him a severe brain injury and he collapsed to the ground. His two
अगर ऐसी सिचुएशन में एकदम छोटी जगह से एकदम तुम सांप बन के तुम अंदर जा रहे हो केव के अंदर, और उस सिचुएशन में अगर किसी को कुछ हुआ, मे बी इंजरी हो गई, ठीक है, एनी एनी इंजरी, तो फिर तुम लेके कैसे जाओगे? आई डोंट थिंक कि उसे तुम लेके जा सकते हो, राइट? लेट्स सी।
teammates rushed to his side, but there was very little they could do. They were more than 3,280 feet underground, trapped in total darkness with a dying man. One of them stayed with Johann while the other began the long climb to the surface for help. It took nearly 12 hours just to reach the cave entrance and call for rescue. When the news reached authorities, they launched one of the biggest cave rescues in history.
ओके।
More than 700 rescuers from 5 different countries were called to help. The rescue teams included cave experts, doctors, and military personnel from across Europe. But reaching Johann was not simple. The path to him was an obstacle course of flooded tunnels and vertical drops. Rescuers had to carry medical equipment, food, and stretchers through spaces barely wide enough
लुक
for
लुक, ऐसी ऐसी जगह पे तुम कैसे ले जा सकते हो उसको, जो बेरली मूव कर सकता है, जो अनकॉन्शियस है आदमी, ठीक है? आई डोंट नो।
one person. Meanwhile, deep inside the cave, Johann drifted in and out of consciousness. The cave was freezing cold and completely wet, making his condition worse every hour. His body temperature kept dropping, and keeping him warm became a constant battle. Finding clean drinking water near the injury site was nearly impossible. The rescue team had to use every method they could think of to keep him alive and hydrated. Doctors who reached him underground worked
ये डॉक्टर को भी ले गए अंदर, हाँ? डैम, डॉक्टर ब्रेव।
in conditions no hospital could ever prepare them for. They stabilized his head injury while lying flat in a space with almost no room to move. Day after day, the team slowly moved Johann through the cave on a special stretcher. They pulled him up vertical shafts and
आई मीन डॉक्टर अंदर गया तो इट मस्ट बी वेरी इजी केव, मतलब ठीक है, नॉर्मल आदमी जा सकता है, उतना भी हार्ड नहीं होगा कि तुम्हें एकदम यू नीड वेरी स्किल्ड, आपको उतनी स्किल्स की जरूरत नहीं है कि यू नीड, आई डोंट थिंक उतनी उतना एक्सपीरियंस चाहिए, दैट्स व्हाई डॉक्टर था, आई गेस, राइट?
carried him through rivers of icy underground water. Some sections took hours to pass through, even though they were only a few meters long. The
ओके।
entire world watched the news as the rescue dragged on for days. After
ओके।
11 long and painful days underground, Johann Westhauser finally reached the surface.
दैट्स इट, एंड या दैट्स इट। थैंक यू फॉर वॉचिंग। केव में मत जाओ, ठीक है? डोंट गो, वरना फिर आपकी वीडियो एक दिन आएगी, फिर मैं रिएक्ट करूंगा, ठीक है, कमेंट्री दूंगा, तो मत जाना। आना है तो कर लो, ठीक है? बाय।